This is a tutorial about the decimal point that we use in our decimal number system. What does it do and how do we use it? Now, from years of teaching maths, I know for a fact that many students get to the end of primary school and there's still a lot of confusion about the decimal point and what it does. So hopefully by the end of this tutorial, you'll be really confident in using the decimal point and understanding what it does in a number. Now, there are 4 things we're going to go over. The first one is quite straightforward. The decimal point is not the same as a comma in maths. Those two do 2 very, very different things. So you can't put a comma in where a decimal point should go. It just doesn't work like that. Remember that. We'll talk about that a bit more as we go through this tutorial. The second thing I'd like to discuss is the fact that every single number that you can think of or write down on a piece of paper has a decimal point. And there are no exceptions. Every single number that you can conceive of has a decimal point. Every single number that you've ever learnt about right from the beginning has a decimal point. Sometimes we don't write them down because we don't need them. Now, think about when you went to school, your first year at school, and you start learning your first maths. I can almost guarantee that your teacher taught you about the number 1, which makes sense because once you understand the number 1, it's easier to learn about the number 2 and so on. So most teachers will start off teaching you about the number 1. But what they did not tell you about the number 1 is that it has a decimal point right over there. Why didn't they tell you that? Well, you didn't really need it back then. You were only just starting out in your maths learning and you didn't need it, although I actually think we should teach the decimal point in year 1, but that's a different story altogether. The other thing they didn't tell you is that there's nothing on the other side of the decimal point. Yeah, we've shown that. There's nothing there. Well, there's still nothing there, but here we actually show it. You could put another 0. You could keep going with your zeros to show that there's nothing on the right-hand side of the decimal point. And that number there is starting to look a bit like the number 100, isn't it? But it is not. It's just 1. Plain old 1. Right, we're going to play a game. It's called Find the Decimal Point. I'm going to put a number up on the screen and you point to where you think the decimal point should be. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. First number, 1,248. Where is the decimal point? Look for it, point to it. There it is. If you thought it was here, then you need to go and watch my video called How to Read Whole Numbers. If you put a decimal point in there, you've made that number 1,000 times smaller. Right, here we go. On to our next number, 24. Where is the decimal point? Locate, find, point. Decimal point is there. 23,045. Find the decimal point and point to it. There it is. Again, not here, not where the space is. 6,125. Now notice here I've chosen to put a comma in. Why have I done that? Because I'd like you to see that if I leave that comma out, it makes no difference to the number. The comma is just there to help us read the number. You could leave a space, and I actually think leaving a space is better than putting a comma. It's just neater, but that's my opinion. And if you like putting commas in, that's what you need to do if it works for you. Right, point to the decimal point. It's right over there. 23,045. Again, I've put a decimal. I've put a comma in there for you. You could have left the comma out and the number would have been the same. Little gap there. Notice it just makes it easier for us to read the number 23,045. If those were all touching each other, it's just a bit more difficult. Right, point to the decimal point. Ready, steady, go. 2,102,454. Do you see how easy it is to read that number when the gaps are there? the spaces, or if you'd had commas there. Either way. Right, point to where the decimal point is. Ready? You're probably getting this by now. 4,102,454, and here I've decided to use commas for a change. Find the decimal point. There it is. $23,454.4. Right, find the decimal point and point to it. There it is. Now, that was not meant to be a trick question. Remember, we said sometimes you don't write the decimal point because you don't need it. Obviously, in this number, I need it, and that's why it's there. So it's obvious. There it is. You couldn't miss it. 454.2. There it is. 0.46. I think you'll know this one. It's pretty straightforward. Right over there. 3,911.7. Point to the decimal point. 2,450,737.28. Find the decimal point and point to it. Well done. 30.24. Find the decimal point. It's right over there. 190,027. Was a bit obvious, wasn't it? Right over there. 23,300. All right, I think you should have got that by now. So if you can see the decimal point, it's very easy to find. If you can't see it, it's to the right of the ones column. The next thing I want to talk about with the decimal point, and it's really, really important. Super important. The decimal point has a job, a very important job. Without it, we could probably not do maths the way we do it. There'd be a lot of things we would not be able to do. Its job is to make sure that the whole numbers stay on one side and the fractions stay on the other. Now, when I say stay, they can move over. If the fractions get bigger, they can jump over. But his job is just to point to where the fractions belong and where the whole numbers belong. Whole numbers there, fractions there. So, for example, in this number, 23,315.34, all the numbers to the left there is whole numbers. All the numbers to the right there are fractions. Can this 3 jump over the decimal point? Yes, it can. If that got 10 times bigger, it would jump over. But that's another lesson altogether. And the last thing about the decimal point, possibly the most important, and this is the one thing that creates a lot of confusion with students, I'm going to stress it very clearly. It is super important. The decimal point never, ever, 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 ever moves. The decimal point cannot move. It's concreted into the maths ground. It says, hey, to the left is whole numbers, to the right is fractions. It cannot move. Anybody who tells you that the decimal point can and does move is absolutely, completely wrong. And if you think that the decimal point can move, it makes your understanding of maths way more difficult. Right, let's summarize. First thing, the decimal point is not the same as the comma. Every single number has a decimal point, even if you can't see it. The decimal point shows us where the whole numbers are and where the fractions are. And the decimal point does not ever move. It never has, and it never will. If you think you've got that 100% and you are absolutely confident, wonderful. If you think you might benefit from watching it again, obviously the more times you watch it, the better your understanding will be.